welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us today and welcome to the Monarch Butterfly Conservation Webinar Series. Today's webinar is Solar Synergy, Delivering Multiple Environmental Benefits, presented by Pete Berthelsen from the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund. My name is Jenna Tots, Education Coordinator for the Monarch Joint Venture. I am joined by my colleague, Alyssa Taylor, Program Coordinator for the NJB. Before we get started, here are a few community guidelines for the webinar. During the webinar, please put your questions in the Q&A box found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll collect those for the Q&A session at the end. You can also upvote your favorite questions. Please use reactions during the presentation, also found on the bottom of the Zoom screen. The speaker will be able to see those, which is really fun. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the Monarch Joint Venture website by Friday of this week. The entire Monarch Conservation Webinar archive is free and available to watch and contains 9 years worth of Monarch Conservation webinars. If you're joining us today but didn't pre-register for the webinar, we would like to count you for attendance and be able to send you follow-up resources. So please email me at learn@monarchjointventure.org with your name and email address. Thank you very much. And finally, our speakers represent their own viewpoints, which are not necessarily those of the Monarch Joint Venture. And now let me introduce our presenter, Pete Berthelsen. As co-founder of the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, Pete has dedicated his life and expertise to conservation and pollinator health. Pete has over 40 years of experience as a biologist and is a true expert in conservation and pollinators. Pete lives in Nebraska with his wife, Laura, and chocolate labs, Gracie and Oscar. I think Oscar is sitting right over there. So he had the pleasure of introducing himself already too. So thank you so much for joining us, Pete, and I will pass it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Let me, let's see, I think I need to share my screen first. And now we'll go here. How's that looking?
Looks great.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Happy to see so many people that have joined the webinar today and really excited to talk about something that we think is just a really unique and growing and significant opportunity. So I'm going to tell you a few thoughts today about pollinators, pollinator habitat, and then talk about how the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund has developed a new program called Solar Synergy that we think can be just incredibly impactful. So let me start with just a really brief introduction of myself. As I mentioned, I'm coming to you from Nebraska today, central Nebraska, part of the state that is the rolling topography that we refer to as the Loess Hills. It's an area of the state that's almost evenly divided between agricultural production and rangeland. This is a little aerial view of our farm and ranch here in central Nebraska. I'm a hobbyist beekeeper, but really what I am is somebody that has spent my career working on designing, establishing, and managing high quality habitat that we often now refer to as pollinator habitat. So let me also start with a little bit of an introduction about the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, because I'm very confident that there's people listening to the webinar today that have never heard of this young nonprofit. And the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund is dedicated to establishing high quality pollinator habitat so that populations can thrive. And that's what they work on putting on the landscape. And we do it by delivering it through what we call next gen habitat. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what next gen habitat means a little bit later in the presentation. But let me also start with laying just a couple of really important foundational thoughts. These are thoughts that kind of drive and motivate how we think about pollinator habitat and how we go about delivering it. So the first one is, personally, I'm excited to get an acre of pollinator habitat wherever we can get it. I'll take it wherever we can get it. And then I want to work to make sure that it is the absolute best it can be. I'll take an acre of habitat wherever we can get it, but then we have to work to really make it the very best that it can be. The second foundational thought is, if we try to approach pollinator health and habitat the way that we have for the last decade, 2 decades, particularly with species like monarch butterflies and that sort of thing, if we try to solve those big, hairy, audacious problems the same way we've been trying for the last couple of decades, we will fail. We will not be successful. So we have to look at things a little bit differently and be a little bit more innovative and a little bit more creative in how we try to go about producing these positive environmental benefits. And that is what we call next gen habitat projects. And again, I'll explain that in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation, but that's the innovative kind of strategy that the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund brings to things. And kind of the last foundational thought that I'll leave you with as we get ready to start this discussion is that just because something is flowering doesn't mean that it has great pollinator value. Not all pollinator habitat is created equal, so we really strive to design pollinator habitat that produces a very significant amount of pollinator value. Okay, so the program that we're going to talk about today is called Solar Synergy, and it works with solar developers very collaboratively to develop and deliver a very wide range of environmental benefits. And we're going to talk about what those benefits are today. But I want to start with giving you 4 realities that are going to really inform this program, Solar Synergy, and the things that we're going to talk about today. Reality number 1 is projects that we would call community scale, distributed scale, smaller projects versus utility scale solar projects, the big ones, are very, very different. Very, very different. And the photo on the left is an example of a community or distributed scale solar project, about 20 acres in size. And the one on the right is a utility scale solar project, about 1,800 acres in size. Here is one of the most significant differences between the two. Utility or community scale solar projects almost always have a lower panel height above the ground that is significantly greater than what we get on a utility scale solar project. On a utility scale solar project, the industry standard is that it's probably about 20 inches from the lower edge of that solar panel to the ground. As somebody that wants to design and create pollinator habitat and pollinator benefits on a solar site, it's really important that we design seed mixtures that do not grow taller than that lower panel height above the ground. So if you just look at these 2 examples right here, community or distributed scale, average kind of common lower panel height versus utility scale, from a vegetative standpoint, that is hugely, hugely different. And it's very challenging to work with the utility scale solar limitations of 20 inches. That's reality number 1. And this program, Solar Synergy, is designed very specifically, strategically to work with utility scale solar projects. Their unique limitations, considerations, and opportunities. That's what this program was designed to work with. Reality number 2 is that when it comes to management of the vegetation that we have on a site, there aren't many things we can do. On a solar site, you're basically limited to mowing, spraying with an herbicide, or grazing with sheep, or a combination of those 3. That's it. We're not going to do prescribed fire. We're not going to be grazing with cattle, typically, and many of the other management techniques that we would probably use successfully on a prairie restoration or a conservation program, planting where we didn't have panels and pilings and all kinds of other electrical wires and things to deal with. That's not a lot of tools in your toolbox. So that is a reality and a limitation, and we have to design seed mixtures that can persist and provide value for 25, 30, 35 years with only these three limited tools that we have to work with. So that influences things very, very significantly. And reality number three is that I think about this all the time. We cannot let the pursuit of perfect become the enemy of doing something really good. And in this case, perfect might be the image on the left, which is a bee and butterfly habitat fund project, pretty representative of what we do in a non-solar setting, very highly diverse, a lot of pollinator value, versus what is on the right, a very limited number of plant species in there because we had to think about how tall are they growing and that sort of thing. That does not mean that the image on the right cannot and does not have a tremendous amount of environmental benefits. So we can't let the pursuit of trying to do something perfect prevent us or limit us from doing something that can be really, really good and have a lot of value. And reality number four is that in the solar synergy program and in everything that we do, we're always trying to think about multiple environmental benefits. And we believe strongly that if we can hit that multiple environmental benefit mark, that a rising tide floats all boats. If we go about designing this and delivering it correctly, we can have benefits for monarch butterflies, grassland songbirds, water quality, soil health, climate change issues with the renewable energy generation. A rising tide can float all boats. Okay, that's my foundational thoughts and my four realities. Now let's talk about how the Solar Synergy Program takes those foundational thoughts and those four realities and weaves them together to have some great outcomes. So the first thing that I want to tell you is that this program was developed thinking about four very key environmental benefits. And we're going to talk about each of these four items. I often refer to them as buckets. The first bucket is what are we planting on the project? What kind of a seed mixture are we designing and using? And how are we getting the most environmental benefits out of that? The next one is going to talk about a carbon sequestration monitoring portion, a pollinator habitat monitoring portion, and then a commercial beekeeping portion of the program. So let's jump right into that first bucket and say that next gen conservation seed mixtures are designed and used on Solar Synergy program projects. And every project has two different seed mixtures that are designed for use on the project. And the seed mixtures that we design, particularly for those that are used in the array area, have a real recipe that is required to figure out how that seed mixture is designed, okay? So that recipe has about 15 to 20 different ingredients in it, all of which are co-equal and all of which have to be considered in how that seed mixture is designed. Here's some of those components of the recipe. Vegetative height. We want to make sure that the plants we use do not grow taller than the lower panel height on those solar panels. Next, we're involved in this because we want to be producing significant pollinator value on the project. So we want to make sure that the plant species that are going into that seed mixture have great pollinator value. We want to think about the future management. How will the plants that we put into a seed mixture respond to things like mowing or sheep grazing? Every project, even if it's a $500 million solar energy project, has a budget. And we want to make sure that we're designing seed mixtures that work with that project budget. We want to make sure that the species that make it into our seed mixture are actually commercially available. We have a 1,500 acre project. Is there enough seed for each of the components of that seed mixture to be able to plant 1,500 acres? How quickly will it establish? Very important that the seed mixture establish quickly so that the project is maintaining its permitting requirements. We want to make sure that the plant species we're using will persist on the site for the length of the lease period. Could be 30, 35 years in length. So we need plant species that will be there that long, plants that are adapted to the geography, to the soil type of the project. They're going to have at least some tolerance to shading. And then if we're a solar project that is using bifacial panels on both sides, we want to make sure that we're designing a seed mixture that reflects more light back up off the ground. That's just 10 different factors that would have to go into the design of the seed mix consideration. And there's more than that. So already talked about it a little bit, but in the array area, it is hugely important whether that lower panel height is 20, 30, 40, or 50 inches above the ground. At 40 and 50 inches above the ground, the horizon is wide in terms of what species can we select to go into a seed mixture. Lots and lots of options. At 20 inches, sometimes not so much. I feel like when I open my toolbox, so to speak, to think about what plant species are available to use that don't grow taller than 20 inches, 18 to 20 inches, I feel like when I open that toolbox, sometimes I have a rusty screwdriver and a roll of duct tape. There aren't many tools that we can pick from. So it can be done, but it's very challenging. So how do we go about delivering those multiple pollinator health and habitat benefits while still wanting to work with the objectives of the solar energy project? We do that by designing 2 seed mixtures that we use on every project. In this example, the area that's kind of in this pinkish color, this is where all the panels are. In every part of the project that is in this pink color right here has a solar array area seed mixture designed and planted on it. And that is a seed mixture that does not grow taller than the lower panel height. We don't ever want that seed mixture to grow taller than the lower panel height, because that would be a triggering mechanism for the site managers to go out and mow the site. So we don't want that to happen. So in the green areas of this project, and this is a real world project, happens to be a project from Ohio that we worked with. The green areas are portions of the project where we've been able to identify chunks that are at least 2 acres in size or larger, and there are no panels. So we're able to design a seed mixture that can grow without vegetative height restrictions. And that area tends to be our more traditional pollinator habitat seed mixture. So in this example right here, which this was about an 800-acre project, about 15 to 20% of the site is in this green area. Could be both inside the fence or outside of the fence right here. That's that traditional pollinator seed mixture. And the majority of the site is established to a seed mixture that doesn't grow taller than the lower panel height, but still has significant pollinator value. So let's look at those 2 seed mixtures just a little bit closer. So that green area, we refer to that as a buffer area. That seed mixture is designed with a minimum of 40 wildflower species in it. Probably more like 60 to 65, but 40 is the minimum with an appropriate seeding rate, a very high pollinator value score, and adapted to that area and that soil type. The Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund provides that buffer seed mixture to the project free of charge. And the way that we do that is it's actually free if what they need is 50 acres or less. And then above that 50-acre mark, they start getting it at a significant cost share value. So that is one of the first environmental benefits that the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund brings. excuse me, to the solar project is by providing one of the seed mixtures at either free or significantly reduced costs. So the array area seed mixture is designed uniquely for each project. Every project is its own unique effort in terms of a seed mixture design. And we're designing it so that it does not grow taller than the lower panel height, but then also considers all those other factors in that seed mixture recipe that we talked about. And we have to think about all kinds of other things like permitting requirements and that sort of thing as well. So one of the requirements that we have with this program to ensure that we're getting those pollinator health and habitat benefits and that they're maintained for 20, 25, 30 years is a vegetation management plan has to be developed for the site that kind of talks about these unique things. And a vegetation management plan is unique to each project and contains all kinds of important information, but really is kind of the code that a project would use to establish their vegetation. This is the plan, the code that we have to follow when we are going about establishing pollinator health and habitat cover on a solar energy project. All right, second bucket is carbon sequestration monitoring. And the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund will be documenting the potential carbon sequestration gains that occur on a site over the first 6 years of the project. And many of the projects that we work with were former agricultural land. So it's not a high bar to think that by taking former agricultural land and enrolling it into a high quality pollinator value habitat that we're going to see carbon sequestration gains. Those plants are going to capture carbon from the atmosphere, bring it into the plant, and sequester it in the ground. The next thing that we do is if carbon sequestration gains are monitored, documented, and those gains are able to be turned into carbon credits, we have willing purchasers of those carbon credits standing by waiting to purchase those from the solar developer. So that is bucket number 2. Bucket number 3 is where we actually go out and monitor the pollinator habitat and the pollinator populations on them. And this is where our friends at the Monarch joint venture join the Solar Synergy program. This great partner is going to be working with us to be performing the monitoring of the habitat and the pollinator populations and the benefits that we're able to document for pollinator health and habitat. And we'll be doing that by sending staff, a team, right out to each of the sites and performing standardized monitoring of both the habitat and the pollinator populations that occur on them. And this is where I'll say just a couple of words about our next gen habitat projects. Currently, there are 5 different research studies that are looking at what are the pollinator health and habitat benefits of Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund seed mixtures. Well, we're very happy to tell you about the first study, which was conducted by the U.S. Geological Survey. And in that study, they worked with the U.S. Department of Agriculture to evaluate the USDA's conservation programs, as well as all the other available pollinator habitat that was on the landscape, whether it be in roadsides or national wildlife refuges, state wildlife management areas, pasture, rangeland, and the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund plantings. And in that study, one of the things that it identified is that, well, we had about twice as many flowers as anything else on the landscape. That's pretty good. Had about 3 times the number of honeybee visits to a bee and butterfly habitat fund project and 8 times the number of native bee flower visits on bee and butterfly habitat fund projects. That's just one of the first 5 studies that are looking at our seed mixtures, but that's the example of where we think next gen habitat projects designed differently, implemented differently, using 2 different seed mixtures is producing very, very significant pollinator health and habitat benefits. Okay, the 4th bucket is we wanted to design these projects to be able to help commercial beekeeping. Remember, one of our foundational thoughts is that the rising tide floats all boats. We believe that we can design these projects to help many, many, many pollinator species, native bees, butterflies, but also things like grassland, songbirds, water quality, soil health, but also commercial beekeeping and honeybees. And let me just show you a couple of things that we're thinking about here. The first is, did you know that since the mid 80s, that the amount of honey produced in the United States has dropped by 44%? Okay, you might look at that number and say, oh, well, that's interesting. I'm not really sure what that means. Well, here's one of the things to consider. As a nation, when you look at the amount of honey that we consume in a year, and this can be commercial products, all kinds of things that it goes into, only 25% of the honey that we consume as a nation is actually produced here in the United States. So we think that the Solar Synergy program can be incredibly impactful to kind of turning some of these numbers around so that we have access to a greater amount of US sourced honey production. And here's a couple of thoughts. Here's a couple of estimates of what we believe that a Solar Synergy project can do. So if we just assume that we have a 1,500 acre project, fully established, it's been designed to think about pollinator health and habitat, we estimate that 300 hives of honeybees would be able to be located on that 1,500 acres, and those 300 hives would produce 15,000 pounds of honey a year. Okay, extrapolate that out across all of the Solar Synergy projects that we're working with, and all of a sudden we're kind of in a position to be able to have a very significant impact on US sourced honey production. Okay, the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund has been working with utility scale solar projects and other solar projects since 2019. We're excited to be able to expand and continue this program. We're excited to be able to do it taking unique approaches to how we establish vegetation, just like you see on this project, where we design, in this one, it was 3 seed mixtures, an array area seed mixture, that buffer area seed mixture, and then a new 3rd pollinator seed mixture that we put into detention ponds and detention basins on the projects. We absolutely feel that this can be incredibly impactful and positive to what we can do on the landscape. So, a couple of things to think about with this project. There is a requirement that there be a vegetation management plan. The agreement also talks about how we're going to collect the data, how we're going to use it. The program is available across the entirety of the United States, and we offer significant incentives. Think about the fact that the carbon sequestration monitoring, the pollinator health and habitat monitoring, and the commercial bee aspects of the program are delivered to the project at no cost to the solar developer. And I guess the last thought to mention here is that kind of the yes, no decision of can a project be enrolled in Solar Synergy comes down to one very, very simple question. Can that project have a very positive impact on pollinator health and habitat? The answer is yes. That project is open for enrollment in the Solar Synergy program. Couple other thoughts are that not a requirement, but we're very happy to offer proven connections to solar developers and their projects that can install and manage the vegetation on a site, that can write the vegetation management plan, can write a grazing management plan. They can use whomever they want, but we're very excited to recommend sources that we have a great deal of confidence in how they perform on solar sites, whether it comes to the management of the site with mowing and spraying and things like that, or actually bringing sheep to the site and performing grazing as a management tool while you're still maintaining the pollinator health and habitat benefits. So we're very excited to be able to kind of mesh all of those things together. This program was publicly launched in March of 2023. So it's about 11 months old. And in 11 months, the program is off and running with a significant number of solar developers in the country that have enrolled projects into the program. And in just a 10-month period, we have over 2,980 acres that are enrolled in the program, but pending enrollment, working towards signing that agreement form, is 28,927 acres of projects spread out across the country in 10 months. Here's what I hope you take from that set of numbers. There is a significant opportunity to positively impact pollinator health and habitat by working with solar developers on projects like this. That is a very significant opportunity that we can make a difference with. Okay, so what about the smaller projects? Why doesn't Solar Synergy work with them? Well, the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund does work with smaller projects, just not through the Solar Synergy program. We work with them through a program that we call Seed a Legacy, which will provide the seed, both seed mixtures, to the project free of charge. We just don't do the carbon sequestration monitoring, the pollinator habitat monitoring, and that sort of thing. There is the requirement that there be a vegetation management plan produced. And if you are somebody that's out there that knows of a project that's going in, or has a project or something for one of these smaller ones, if you scan that QR code that's on the screen right now, that would take you right to our website to be able to allow you to go through that enrollment process. And it's an online enrollment process. And I'm just going to wrap this up today, saying really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this exciting program, but also the really unique opportunities that are out there on the landscape. The opportunity to have 1,500 acres-ish of contiguous, high-quality pollinator habitat, that doesn't happen every day. So this is a really, really unique opportunity, and we look forward to working with more and more projects to produce outcomes like this. And I look forward to taking care of your questions here that might come up following this presentation. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Pete. As a person that used to work in climate change education, it's really fun to see this synergy here, no pun intended there, of this project and the work obviously I do now with monarchs and pollinators. So I did post a couple of links in the chat for everyone to take a look at. Pete, if you want to just say a couple of things, it was the Solar Synergy.
You bet. Let me, I'm opening the chat right now. So one of the things that we have in here is we would have, I believe that we have the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund's Pollinator Habitat Establishment and Management Guide that is on there. That is a PDF. It's on our website. You can click on the link here. Provides very detailed step-by-step guidance that I think would be very valuable to anybody, not this isn't designed for solar. This is just about pollinator habitat establishment and management. And then we also have a cool flyer on there that can tell you more about the Solar Synergy program. So as an example, if you're somebody that resides in an area where there is a solar project coming into your area, I hope that you might be somebody that would raise your hand and say, hey, are there pollinator habitat and health benefits being included in that project? Providing a copy of that flyer can make that connection happen. But the most important thing is be that person that raises your hand and asks that question.
Love that. I'm going to start with just a question I'm asking everyone this season. What is your favorite milkweed? And we talked previously, this could be a loaded question here for you, Pete.
Sullivan, Lepia sullivani. I would say, sometimes called smooth milkweed, sometimes called prairie milkweed. I call it Sullivan's milkweed. Really cool personality to it with the smooth leaves and how it grows. And then obviously the gorgeous aroma of the blossoming flowers.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, let's jump right in. A lot of questions with some really specific answers for pollinator habitat, as well as kind of the solar aspect here. Do you use temp irrigation to get your desired seed mix established, especially with a rain shadow from the panels? Are commercial arrays willing to have permanent supplemental water for the vegetation?
Yep. So the ideal situation is no. We want to design a seed mixture that grows in that environment. And remember that we're really talking about partial shading. I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can back out here to some of my other photos, but no, I guess I can't. But just know we're talking about partial shading. And what we really need to do is to design a seed mixture that will grow in that geography and in that soil type, does not need to be replanted, with appropriate management will function for that 20, 30 years of that lease agreement for that project.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Do you know of any examples of success of this approach in semi-arid to arid sites?
That is a challenge. So if you, the short answer is no, but I'm going to give a longer answer. And the longer answer is, if you think about the Solar Synergy program, one of the things I said at the end is our yes, no about enrollment in the program is the answer to the question, is there a high likelihood of having a great pollinator health and habitat outcome? The answer to that question becomes harder to say yes to, not impossible, but harder the less annual precipitation that you get. So, for example, if you were in the southwest part of the country, here's some of the challenges. You have to think about what grows there natively, number one. Number two, is it going to not grow too tall? Number three, can I actually buy seeds for that species that grows in that arid environment? So it becomes very, very challenging. Not impossible, but very, very challenging to do.
Great. We've got a couple of questions. One was upvoted, but they're very similar. I'm just going to read them both real quick. If much of the acreage is former agricultural land, is there a need or initiative to remove dirt and remove herbicides, pesticides from the soil so as to not contaminate flowers? And then solar projects at times are established on previously contaminated lands, heavy metals, pesticides. What are you doing to kind of account for that potentially contaminated land?
Do we have another hour to go to answer? Those are
Stick
great
around,
questions.
folks.
They're not short answers. So the first one was no. We generally we're not removing soil because we have concerns about herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, that sort of thing. That answer does not mean that that's not a consideration. Okay, so some herbicides have an extended residual effect that we have to take into consideration as we design the seed mixture and then try to establish it. So that's number one, but we don't go about removing that soil or anything like that. The next one was about, basically, they didn't use the terminology, but they're talking about brownfield sites, going over an abandoned landfill or things like that. Solar sites can go over abandoned landfills, but not easily. Okay, and the reason is because a retired landfill will have what's called a cap over it, usually a layer of clay soil, so that water cannot go down through the cap into the old landfill and then leach out those harmful attributes that were identified in the question. So one of the reasons why there's not a lot of solar sites on a retired landfill is because what's called the pilings, that piece of metal that goes into the ground that the solar panel is attached to, cannot puncture that cap. If it did, that would be a source for where rainfall could go in, get into the old landfill, and then leach those negative things out into our groundwater and that. So there aren't lots of projects where those sorts of things happen. They can happen with different mounting systems and that sort of thing, but it's not very common.
All right, makes sense. A few more upvoted questions here. I'm curious what pollinator monitoring methods are used. Are they standard for all projects?
Yep. So great question. And I'm going to expand my answer to include the carbon sequestration as well. So Monarch Joint Venture was picked not just because they're a cool partner that we work with on all kinds of things, but also because the Monarch Joint Venture has the standardized monitoring techniques. IMMP would be one of them. And we want everything to be standardized. We want the data that we collect to be able to go right into the Monarch Conservation database. Same thing for our carbon sequestration. We are using sampling techniques for the carbon sequestration monitoring that go with the monitoring techniques and a study being conducted by Argonne National Lab, so that our data and their data can go like that. And then we have a bigger data pool. And it goes into large national studies to expand those databases. And if you're a solar developer that's on the call today and you're listening to this, know that yes, we collect data off of your site, but individual sites and individual developers are not identified in our data collection.
Great, thank you. Question about managed honeybees. I'm curious how managed honeybees impact the availability of resources for native species in the same area. Is there a significant drop in native pollinator populations when there's large number of commercial hives in the area?
Yep. So what we found is a significant increase in native bee populations. I assumed this question was going to come. One of the incredibly unique things that the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund does, and I'm really stressing the word unique because I've been doing this a long time. I don't know of any other conservation program that really takes this two seed mixture approach. And I'm not going to tell you that there's not interaction and going across both ways, but the two seed mixture that we take helps to really kind of put the native bees in that buffer mix and the honeybees in that array area mix. And that's not to say that there's not things crossing, but that rising tide floats all boats. And by designing and providing great pollinator habitat on something in our example we gave was 1,500 acres, there's a lot of room for a lot of benefits and a lot of species to benefit from it.
Great. Where do you get the funds to pay for the free acres?
Yeah, good question. So I'm going to give a little bit of all my answers are long, but this is going to be a little bit of a longer answer as well. I describe the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund as a big tent. Okay, here's what I mean. We have broad financial support from entities like Costco and Whole Foods, to retail entities like Kmart, to individual foundations, to crop commodity groups like the corn growers, soybean group, to all the way to egg industry, to a Bayer and a Syngenta and things like that. Okay, there are not many opportunities in this world where a Costco and a Whole Foods would work with a Bayer and a Syngenta, but in the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, and this thing that we describe as the big tent, there's room for everybody to come together. And I just want to add this thought, because some people right now are grimacing with that comment that I just gave you. And they're like, oh, no, no. I believe that there are what I call lumpers and splitters. Okay. A splitter is somebody that might say, egg industry, they've produced products and things that have really hurt monarch butterflies. And is that true? Absolutely. Absolutely. Without question. But I'm a lumper. In my career, I'm a lumper. And a lumper is somebody that says, okay, yep, maybe that the products that you've produced have been part of the problem, but does that mean that they should not be at the table to be part of the solution? I'm a lumper. I want to bring everybody together, because if you have a big, hairy, audacious problem, and folks, by the way, monarch butterfly populations are a big, hairy, audacious problem right now. Second lowest recorded numbers in history for the overwintering population of the eastern monarch population. That's a big, huge, hairy, audacious problem. We have to have all hands on deck involved in coming up with ideas. And if you go back to one of my philosophies that I talked about, if we try to solve things with the same approach that we've been using for the last 10 years, we will not be successful. So we have to think about how to go about this differently, innovatively, creatively, and in a process that brings everybody into the big tent.
Beautifully said. All hands on deck for sure. Everyone at the table, I think, is so important. Interesting question here. Can you do this program under wind turbines?
Yes, here's the deal. Wind turbines have an itty bitty little footprint on them, and we're really excited about working on projects that are 800 to 3,000 acres in size, because we can have so much of a greater impact. Now, I think that everybody listening to this would know that where pollinators are concerned, if you build it, they will come. So is the footprint around wind turbines important? Absolutely. But this program's focus is working on utility scale solar.
Yeah, definitely a little more bang for your buck in that sense.
Yep.
Couple of more specific questions. I know you touched on carbon sequestration a little bit, but just a few other ones. What is the intensity of the carbon sequestration sampling you're providing? And is the carbon sequestration quantifiable by acre?
I'm sorry to laugh, but these are big questions.
This list keeps growing. Everyone is so interested in this topic. I'm so glad.
Great. Super. Happy to hang in there and keep answering questions. Here's the most important thing I can say. The sampling protocol follows the nationally developed sampling protocol, so that our data goes just like that with their data. And it's the soil inventory project is the one that is coming up with the sampling protocol that we follow, and then it's going to be done in a fashion to mesh with the Argonne National Lab. So that means that for each project, there's a grid sample that's out there. You take soil samples at 2 different depths, and all of that sort of thing goes to a certified lab, and we measure it over a 6-year period in year 0, which is kind of pre-construction, and then 2, 4, and 6.
Great. I think we'll do 3 more questions. We've had quite a lot of questions. Like I said, the list keeps growing, so we'll send any that we don't get answered to Pete and see if we can finalize the list. But any opportunity for volunteering on projects?
Yes. Well, the short answer is yes. The long answer is yes is the answer. I'm sticking with yes. Know that it's not on a solar site. You know, there's this big fence around it for security reasons and a reason. And so it's not just like, yeah, come on over, you know, but those things can all be taken care of. So the short answer is yes. Please get in touch with us and we'd be happy to talk with you. We are, the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund is one of the better kept secrets in the pollinator health and habitat world, I think, because we're so young. There's still a lot of people that are unfamiliar with us. So we're absolutely looking for people to help be advocates of the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund to help others know who we are and what we do.
Great. I had a very specific one about wanting to know if there's any sites that y'all have in Texas, but maybe just kind of giving a general idea of where your sites are.
Yeah. So right now, and remember, the Solar Synergy program is only 10, 11 months old. Okay. And we're zeroing in on 30,000 acres enrolled. It's not going to stop there. You know, I predict that we will be enrolling between 10 and 15,000 acres a year. Right now, probably the hottest place that things are happening is in Texas. You know, I personally work with 16 utility scale solar projects in the state of Texas alone today. So we have not worked with any projects west of the Rocky Mountains yet. Everything has been east of the Rocky Mountains, but we have projects in something like 16 states right now. So in Texas, I think the other thing was, are we working in Texas and where in Texas? With 16 projects, it's scattered around the state, but that Waco, Dallas kind of part of the state has lots and lots of projects going in.
We'll finish up with one more question. And again, y'all had so many wonderful questions. We will be sure that we get as many of these answered after the fact, and then the recording will be posted by Friday. Do you include any grasses in your seed mixes or only forbs?
No, you have to have grasses in there to meet all the other requirements that project is going to have, you know. So you have to think about the fact that these projects have a unique conditional use permit that has vegetative requirements in there that are related to erosion and water quality and things like that. So yes, we absolutely have grasses in there. They're not just forbs, but particularly for the buffer mix, the more traditional pollinator habitat mix where we don't have to worry about how tall that mix grows. It is definitely forb dominated, but it absolutely has grasses in there.
Great.
Those are some really good questions.
And like I said, there is plenty more, but we will send those over to you and see how many we can get answered. And again, I will send out a follow-up email on Friday along with the recording that will be posted on our website. But again, we really want to thank you, Pete, for presenting today and answering so many wonderful questions. Thank you to everyone for participating. We really hope to see you all again for our next webinar. Will be titled Monarchs 101 Back to Basics with Katie Lynn Puffer, our education manager at NJV. That'll be on Tuesday, March 26th. Again, thank you all so much for being here and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.